Hey, Tim, what are the differences in the sports culture between Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area?
You know what? It's because I grew up in the Bay Area, so it's more, it was more me getting used to the LA sports culture than the other way around, and getting right back into it once I moved back here, because I was in LA for 10 years. I think LA's not surprisingly more personality-oriented, more kind of celebrity-oriented, which certainly would be the cliche, but it's certainly big guy, you know, Kobe, Shaq, Oscar De La Hoya. Those are the guys that I was around. Sort of their circles and their stories were everything. Now, we got that here, but I think there's a little bit more, you know, longer storylines, a little bit more, you know, we certainly got the huge personalities here, Al Davis and on down the road, but in LA, it was kind of more impact. It was Kobe, boom, just do something on Kobe. Barry Bonds was like that, but also it was a little tougher to do with just Barry. I think that we just got more deeper entrenched storylines that date back years and years. In LA, you just kind of go from hot story to hot story to hot story. I kind of like both. I like doing both things, but LA was much more of a, you know, De La Hoya, you know, what's he doing now? What is he thinking now, as opposed to where does he fit in the world of boxing? You know, it's a simplified version of that, but I don't think it's wrong.
Now, I remember at Candlestick Park, there used to be chants, Dodgers suck, Dodgers suck. I don't remember such chants in Los Angeles.
Now, growing up here, I knew it, and working down there, you certainly get the feel that the people in San Francisco care much more about hating L.A. than the people in L.A. care about anything. There's much more passion. It's a little bit, you know, it's a smaller city, less population. Certainly with its own pride and its own traditions. But in LA, it's about getting to the next thing. It's about being part of the next thing. It's about being part of the cool thing. In the Bay Area, it's about hating the people who just want to be part of the cool thing. In the Bay Area, it's a little bit more about getting, you know, sticking with who you are with and hoping and praying that they win at some point, although less and less championships in San Francisco Bay Area than you have in LA. When I was growing up in San Francisco, I recall it was always the Rams were winning, not championships, but they were winning. The Lakers were winning. SC was winning in football. UCLA was winning in basketball. Dodgers were winning in baseball. It was a pain. And when the Giants were terrible, I don't think the 49ers were just getting good when I was in state junior high school. Warriors had won in 74, 75, and then had not been good after that. It was torture. It was torture, but that's part of the psyche. It's part of the fabric. You know, I wouldn't say that in the Bay Area we're like Chicago Cub fans, but I think it's a little more appreciated that you have to suffer through some things. In LA, you don't suffer. You just move on to the next thing. If you can't get a championship with one of the teams you're following, you just move on. You go to SC football. There's all of a sudden, you know, millions and millions of fans of SC football. You can't get a ticket to 94,000 seat LA Coliseum. That wasn't the case 7 years ago. It's the case now, though.
Do you think there's something pathological about this hatred?
I don't know. I mean, having grown up in the middle of it, I just think it's the way you cheer for sports, the way you see things. I don't think it's pathological. I just think it's the way it works. You know, you have a large populace of LA. You have the slightly less populous area of the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it's just natural. I grew up in the San Francisco part of it, so I don't think it's anything weird. I just think it's a natural part of when you're in a city that doesn't win as much as the other city. I think it's about even now if you count all the 49er titles. But if you have that feeling, you are slightly jealous of the other city, and you grow to dislike its excesses. And certainly the LA area has about all excesses. That's what it's all about, is the excesses. It's a great contrast. It's a great comparison. LA people can look over to San Francisco and say, what are you bothering us for? And the San Francisco people can say, we can't stand the stuff that you know, Tom Lasorda and the Laker girls and all the things that LA stands for. It's a good contrast, that's all.
Do you think the people who are screaming Dodgers suck and the like, you know, who paint themselves up on a Sunday, do you think these are fundamentally happy people?
I know. Large percentages of them, probably. Small percentages of them aren't going to be happy in any endeavor that they do. anybody who's passionate about something can be unhappy about a lot of things. But at that moment, at that point in time, they're just doing it to entertain themselves. The people who hate this team or that team or hate this player or that player, I think it's just part of the passion. I know they hate me at times, and that's all good for me. I just think if people didn't love and hate the stuff that we do and the sports world that we cover, it wouldn't be that interesting. There wouldn't be that many people buying the paper or clicking the internet or whatever they do. It's not the prettiest part of sports, but I laugh when I remember Kurt Rambis when I was covering his intern season with the Lakers, and he was clearly not going to be brought back, or it was borderline, and he took a press conference to say, "Oh, this unbelievable pressure that you put upon the Lakers and the Laker coach, it's just not fair." And at that point, I had to say, "Isn't that why it's a good job? Because people expect a lot. The Clipper job, no one expects much. It's a bad job. The Lakers job, where people love you or hate you or hold you to these incredible high expectations, is a great job because you can get to be great." I've always thought that. If the more people care about what you do, you're going to get the highs, you're going to get the lows, but it's just more people, it's more important.
Aside from sports being your profession, what role has sports played in your life?
I grew up with 4 boys in my family, so we just played sports. It's what we did. We played and talked sports. The family got together. We went to Giants games. We went to 49ers games. It just was part of what we did. I don't think it's wildly different than a lot of people's families. It's a big family of all boys, so that's what we did. We had other events in the family, but when most of the time we'd be watching a Giants game or watching an A's game or talking about the Warriors. It just was what we did and what we talked about. I'm the only one who did it for a profession, but we still talk sports. We still do sports. We just, at family events, that's what when the TV goes on, normally goes to a football game or a baseball game.
How many generations has your family been in America?
I'm 3rd generation, so my grandparents on both sides came over from Japan, and I guess that'd be in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then my parents, the parents were both born here. They're Nisei and I'm Sansei, 3rd generation.
Does sports play a different role in Japanese-American culture than in general American culture?
Yeah, I think sports plays a huge part in the Japanese-American culture. So I would imagine it's very similar. Hard to say it's any different. The Japanese-Americans that I know, that I'm friends with, that I've hung around with, that I grew up with, crazy about sports. Crazy about sports. Whether that's an assimilation thing, I don't know. It's just something that, again, I don't want to completely project everything upon percentages here, but the people that I know, the kids I grew up with, it was just part of what a discussion was. Sports was something that we did and we played. The Japanese-American basketball leagues are huge throughout the state. Incredibly competitive, incredibly well organized. And I think that follows through in the sports. I laugh about it because I didn't really know this or detect it until I started blogging a lot about the Warriors, and that was basically about 2 years ago where I really started going with it. Huge percentages of my audience that I understand, or the people who click onto it, are Asian American. A lot of them are Japanese American. I just think there is an internet-savvy Asian basketball crowd that, as an Asian American, I had not really known about until it started hitting with this website, and I'm quite proud of it, quite happy about it. Not everybody loves what I do, but they read it, or they say they read it, or they write that they hate it. It's all part of the deal, and I think it's out there, and I think it's huge. When you see the internet websites that are devoted to the Warriors, a Warriors fan site, it's largely Asian. There's something there, and I think teams know that. And I think that is a very healthy, good, passionate crowd out there. How many
professional athletes are Japanese Americans, of which you're aware, in the 3 major sports?
There's more than you think. It's certainly partial Japanese. It's not full Japanese blood, but I was at a fundraiser for the Japanese American National Museum. What was that, about 8 years ago, and they invited every single athlete that they could find or think of with Japanese